Everyone. Welcome back to another episode of VC TV, where we're going to discuss insights, upcoming trends in the VC world, as well as connect founders with investors. Right to your TV, or for 99% of us, our computer screen and mobile phones. My name is Kent Makashima, and I'll be your host for today. So on today's episode, we'll be discussing investments and pivots during the COVID-19 pandemic in travel, transportation, and hospitality space. An industry for sure that's been largely impacted with the pandemic, but it's been making shifts to adapt, and it's definitely not going anywhere, especially with signals such as Airbnb's IPO on the horizon. But before we get started, we'll love to say thank you to all our live audience for tuning in, as always. And if you have any questions during the episode to talk to our panel, please leave a comment below, and we'll make sure to ask it to our speakers. If you're a founder or investor who would love to be on the show as well, or pitch to investors, please reach out. We'd love to have you share your insights and make opportunities happen. Again, as always, thank you to the LATOKEN team for making VCTV possible. Wouldn't happen without y'all. But on that note, love to get today's episode started. And we have an awesome list of our investors and experts on today's panel, and I'd love to introduce them to y'all. So first we have Irina. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to introduce myself. My name is Irina Litchfield. Many know me as a crypto superwoman. I am a president of Lumeria. Lumeria is where capital meets innovation. Our goal is to create truly global capital markets. So it's innovation platform. We support innovations and really to bring back small market cap. Small market cap is dying. It's not very well talked about. We should have a small market cap subject and panel for it, but it's a pleasure to be here. Travel, transportation, and hospitality is an important topic for us, and it's very relevant, and I'm looking forward to diving into that.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. And then our other panelist today, Julio, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here. And hi, Irina, again. We're a bit of old friends, thanks to LATOKEN. We have to thank anybody who is interested in having online events and informing people during these difficult times about what can still be done. I think right now there's mixed news. But we'll get into that in a second. I'm Julio Marquez. I'm a partner at New York Bay Capital. It's obviously we're a firm based in New York City, although we have offices in various places, typically around Latin America, and we also go to Canada. So we tend to cover this continent, and we are investors as well. In other words, New York Bay Capital is both an advisor to many companies as well as an investor in many companies. Sometimes we're both to the same company, sometimes we're only investors, and sometimes we're only advisors. It really depends on the size of the target. With small companies, we tend to be investors. With large companies, we tend to be advisors. And certainly travel, entertainment, leisure is one of our verticals. We don't have many, but we're always happy to talk about the verticals that we do cover, this being one of them. But again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Julio. In today's episode, we have a small group of guests with us, so we'll make sure to get really intimately into the discussion about this topic. Again, my name is Kent Makashima. I am the host for today's episode. Usually spend my time in the blockchain space, but occasionally VC work, so like today. But let's get today's episode started. So to preface our discussion, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the state of the industry. Travel, mobility, VC investments over the last 6 years has multiplied about 22 times, up to a $30 billion market as of last year. Especially investments from China, US, familiar names like DiDi, Gojek, Grab, Airbnb, household names across the world. However, pandemic hit, we've seen a lot of the big dogs like Expedia, Airbnb, refinancing, but loading up. So definitely the market isn't going anywhere. So I'd like to start with you, Julio. What kind of macro trends are we looking at for, the travel, transport, and hospitality industry, moving forward? The pandemic has already happened. We've adjusted a little bit. But, what are we looking at for the next 6 months to a year out?
Well, hopefully we're looking at a slow recovery. There are exceptions to every rule, but the travel, entertainment, and hospitality industry is probably the hardest hit by the pandemic. Again, even though we don't follow every industry, we can tell you that in some other industries that we follow, the recovery came quickly, or the industries were not hit as hard. But in terms of travel, hospitality, leisure, I mean, look, people are shut down in their houses in many cities and in many countries around the world. People have drastically cut down their air travel. Airplanes, simply no airline is operating at the same capacity as it once had. I have a couple of exceptions in mind that I can discuss, but by and large, most airlines are not predicting going back to the 2019 levels until after 2021. So even 2021, no one is predicting a return to 2019 levels. So maybe by 2022. When airlines hurt, the entire travel industry hurts, because if people aren't going anywhere, well then, what's the point in having hotels and different tour packages and destinations? Business travel is down. So it's hard not to be pessimistic. The only good thing about this is that we know that there's progress being made every day on the fight against the virus, and that relatively speaking, we're not going to be that far away, or we're not that far away from good treatments, even from a vaccine. I mean, we just saw the president of the United States go to the hospital, and I know that there's some question about how much data or how much information we really got, but it does seem like the story is he's older, he has some other health issues, and yet, of course, he had the best treatment available, but after 3 days in the hospital, he seems to be doing fine. So it's not as, we're moving forward in treatments, and we're moving forward in the road to the vaccine. And until that happens, we're not really going to have a complete recovery. That being said, there are strategies that certain companies are following, or places where certain companies have put themselves in that have, by and large, almost isolated them from the situation. And I also think that it's a good time for entrepreneurs to come up with, either pivoting or new ideas entirely on how to deal with the situation. I mean, obviously, Zoom is a perfect example of something that has happened that has leapt forward. And, let me end there in terms of my answer, but I do have some specific examples that I want to discuss in a little bit with some companies that we're working on that, seem to be working, at least to save their lives, right? At least to keep them from bankruptcy. And there are opportunities there. There are opportunities to make money there.
Perfect. We'll dive into those in a bit. I think you hit, a very key point. Air travel, is down. At its peak, it's been down 94% globally, and that drastically affects, all other industries, whether it's travel for leisure or travel for business. But I'd love to get into the insights of, Irina. Do you have any other key insights you'd like to share about any macro trends in the industry?
Are you asking me? Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay, I missed it. Yes. So when I think of macro, I in the travel industry, I see a huge opportunity in actually advancement of aerospace technology. We kind of hit our bottleneck in the travel time, so we're not really going faster. And it was application of innovation allows us to travel faster. There was not really a need for it because the business was kind of going well, and there was not much space for competition to step into it. Now that existing aerospace companies, airline companies are hurting, it opens up huge opportunities for those that are building innovations come in and actually apply apply their business practices. And so I believe right now we're seeing huge push into faster and more luxurious travel. And that goes to not just travel here, but also traveling, going into a lower orbit. So vertical launch is a big kind of a push that we're seeing right now to go to space, near non-gravity basically is also something that is happening a lot, and we see huge competition in that. So a lot of money is being deployed currently into innovations in how we travel, right? And again, I think to me that's on a macro level, that's something to keep an eye open on. And is if you're an investor, really look at that aspect and understand that opportunities are open there at the times of the challenges, right? And this is the best time, I believe, for competitors to step into air travel, because it's just going to be much better ecosystem for them.
Right. It's definitely, when industries are down, it's a very interesting time for them to reassess themselves and figure out how to innovate and move forward. Air travel's down 94%, train travel's down 70 to 80%. But interestingly, cars are back. Everyone's like traveling by car because it's the only way that you can get around, which is kind of like mixing up how we're looking at people are getting to hotels, the proximity geographically, how far they can get around you. But looking into different niches in the travel and hospitality space, definitely aggregators and marketplaces are affected heavily by COVID. Airbnb, Casa, hotel websites, Priceline, especially airline aggregators. The supply side is definitely changing. So is there any specific, back to you, Irina, but is there any specific, like niche industry, whether it's like the marketplaces, the aggregation companies that have been hit particularly hard and need a pivot, or is there any that are largely successful right now during this time?
Well, everybody is affected, right? Though I would argue for train industry, it's much, it's much better time right now because people are really scared to get on planes. They have a terrible association with it. By the way, if you're going to be traveling, airplane is one of the safer places for you to be because they have HEPA filters and they have great practices that they're applying, best practices now. So it's one of those bias that people have that are misunderstandings. Obviously, as you said, cars, but really RVs. Okay, RVs here, I don't know about US, but in America, basically already in June, they were sold out. Now, of course, they ran out of inventory because of the problems with supply chain. So you basically, when you went in Texas, where we have abundance of RVs and campers, dealerships, right? It's just they're everywhere. When you went to look for RV, you would not have ability to buy most of the models because people were swapping them off the shelves. And so it is very, very popular right now. And with that, now you have the traveling that is kind of a self-driven traveling. A lot of people are now saying, okay, I'm actually going to sell my house and get in an RV and use these opportunities to do my work because it allows me to slowly kind of move from a city to city and still continue having my high-level important meetings that that are within the COVID, whatever restrictions. You do that. And so hotels, and I'm seeing a lot of interesting technology that basically is the filter for the hotels, for entering and exiting for guests. So they're applying the little, you come in, there's a screen, it scans you, it takes a picture of you, it tells you whether you go in and out. I mean, that is something that people are very comfortable in. And so a lot of hotels, they're not doing great, but they're doing good. I mean, in Austin, and again, in Austin, we were totally sold out all the way through summer for upscale hotels. Sold out, and sold out events as well, private events for those. So hospitality is doing a great job actually taking advantage of this situation and now providing more higher upscale kind of a services. Now, of course, the bottom line hotels, so and that's you know, we kind of seen a separation. Those that can provide upscale you know, services, gatherings, they're able to charge for that, right? But those that can't, the bottom line hotels, the regular business travel, those are hit very, very hard because people are just not staying there. They're not going there, and they're sleeping in RVs and they're traveling.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit a couple of great points there. You know, first, again, like the RV market completely, you know, exponentially has grown. Great way for people, you know, to travel and get out, and, you know, a little bit more hospitality than just a car. And then second, you know, the hotel industry, especially, you know, high up there in the luxury chain, is able to invest to make these changes to make their guests more comfortable and come back. You know, it's quite amazing statistic that you said, you know, in Austin, it's, you know, booked out. I know in San Francisco, we just opened up hotels a couple of weeks ago, and you can see the high end ones already have people coming in and out. You know, people don't want to stay at home. They will travel when given the opportunity. But, you know, let's go to you, Julio. You know, you talked a little bit earlier about hinting that, you know, there are other, you know, niches that have evolved successfully during this time. What is your insight?
Well, let me see if I can project here. You can see the background. These are 5 companies that we work with, or 5. The flag there is the flag of Ecuador. Ecuador is one of our clients, and we advise the country. And it's a country that really depends on tourism for a large amount of its income. It has oil, which it can help these days, even though oil prices also went down. But Ecuador has the Galapagos Islands, and they're a major tourist destination. Some people don't even know that the Galapagos belong to Ecuador, but they do, and it's kind of like Hawaii for the United States. They're out there in the Pacific Island, but they happen to control them. You know, so that's not, I couldn't call that a company, but it's definitely, you know, a place where we've been worrying about how to continue to attract people and substitute, you know, the millions of visitors they used to have with at least something that will provide a steady flow of income without the numbers. So you really have to assess things like, how, you know, where do people stay? What kind of assurances can you give them? And how can you plan visits? And how can you plan, you know, circumstances around somebody having still a very good time in the Galapagos? And it's really a little bit about social distancing. It's about maybe higher prices, but assurances that the experience can still be fantastic, and market the fact that it's not going to be crowded. You know that if you're going to go out traveling, if you feel safe, because you are in the hands of, you know, responsible operators, a little bit what Irina was talking about, how airlines are conducting themselves and hotels, you are likely to have a great time these days because prices shouldn't be that high, and you're going to really see, you know, the Louvre is not teeming with millions of people, you know, or at least literally hundreds of people blocking your view of the Mona Lisa these days. Venice is obviously not full of, you know, tourists traversing the streets and making things a little bit less enjoyable, right? So you need to focus on that type of curated experience. We've been talking to, you know, up here on my above my head is a logo called Easy Life. Easy Life is an app. It's a company we like very much. A bit of a startup, but you can already download their app. And Easy Life helps you plan your day or plan your activities. It actually gathers psychographic information about you, the user, People are familiar with that already. But when you download Easy Life, it's almost like downloading a dating app. They don't immediately give you recommendations like a TripAdvisor would. They really ask you questions about your personality, you know, where you live, what you like, what kind of food you enjoy, you know, what they draw a psychographic profile of you, and then they match you with experiences. And so this leads to a sort of a highly curated type of an experience for city life. Um, it works for London right now very well. It works for New York City, mostly Manhattan. But if you're familiar with these destinations and you enter your information, it'll really guide you through things you can do that are obviously, you know, safe. Again, depending on the information you give is the kind of information you're going to get out. But if you have concerns about COVID, if you have concerns about, you know, safety, if you have concerns about this or that, it's going to integrate that into its kind of recommendation engine. And I recommend that you take a look at it. They'll be available over time. They're going to be everywhere. But for now, London, New York, kind of leading places, and incorporating that curation that the traveler right now needs, because the traveler doesn't know ahead of time if something is safe, if something is well managed, if it's not well managed. And you can spend a lot of time reading reviews about different things and trying to create your own trip, but you can rely on these types of apps to plan a trip or plan your day or plan your week somewhere. Rotamundos, which is the other brand I have here, that's a Latin American hotel chain that operates a lot like Oyo, which is an Indian company. It's become famous in the sort of leisure and travel world, Oyo, from India. And what they do is they aggregate small hotels that were not already on Expedia or on Booking. And so they are giving you vastly more options in places that are a little bit more remote. And you can also plan vacation or leisure through Rotamundos to properties that were not on anyone's radar, but they've used this time to go around signing up small hotels, typically, you know, family-run hotels, few rooms, but they can give you really full experiences and will, you know, take care of the customer in more than just here's your room and here's your key and you're on your own. You know, it's more of this curated experience. I could tell you a little bit more about the other logos that I have in front of me just because we know them well. Obviously, Holiday Inn Express is in the danger zone because they were really catering. It's not the high-end experience that Irina was describing, almost by definition, and it's really more a chain that caters to the business traveler. So they're in trouble. So they are appreciating some advice of how to transform themselves or how to at least offer a different type of service these days so that people feel like it makes sense to stay at a Holiday Inn Express. But when you upgrade service, you get a response from people, and we've also seen through them and their data that it's not that people don't have money as much; it's that they just don't want to spend it. The people are in a cautious mode. But so you can have a business strategy based on slightly higher prices these days. Things are expensive because, like Irina said, things are even get sold out because there isn't that much of a supply to match a demand. And so the logical thing of that is that the prices can rise. And if you can really raise more prices, if you were pursuing before the crisis a low cost strategy, you might be able to revise that, increase your services, increase your value added, and hope for that higher end. That's the type of juncture where we're helping Holiday Inn Express think about where they're going. Viva Aerobus is an interesting thing. It's an airline in Mexico. Now, they happen to be a very successful airline in Mexico. Why? Because they've integrated themselves with buses. And Mexico used to be, like many countries around the world, there was one market for air travel and a very different market for bus travel. And those two were almost different countries. They didn't mix. The bus terminal is in one part of town, and people ride the bus to a different town, and they've never been on an airplane before, and they load their chickens on a bus. Or they load whatever they want on a bus, and they go from point A to point B only on buses. Even if it takes many different bus segments in many different cities and a much longer period of travel, it's cheaper, and they're used to the bus. As the name says, Viva Aerobus is really the first company that has thought about this and said, let's offer certain plane segments to supplement our existing bus rides. So they're not trying to take everyone everywhere on airplanes like maybe Southwest Airlines would, right? They're really focused on combining the bus service with the airline, and they're the first company in Mexico that takes buses to the airport. They put them with the same ticket, right? You can go to a bus station, buy a ticket to a different city, and then the company routes you first on a bus to the airport, then from one airport to another airport, and then from another bus to your final destination. By doing this, they've been able to get more people in the air, and therefore become more efficient, because it's actually cheaper to send someone between 2 points on an airplane. It's more efficient, and it's cheaper if it's longer, if it's a long ride. But it hadn't been done before. But now what we have is airplanes that have a crowd that looks like bus people, but they're happy on an airplane because they're getting to their destination faster, more efficient, and in many ways cheaper. It's also low cost. It's a low cost airline. Anyway, look, it's a tough time for the industry, but players in the industry are trying to figure things out to compete. And some entrepreneurs, like the guys behind Easy Life or Rotamundos, are trying to come up with, new ways to do business to try and address the very skewed demand for services that exists right now.
I think you hit like two very key points there. Adapting to new types of markets that come out of this, especially like Rotamundos with their aggregation of like these smaller hotels that are focused on experience that they can offer than just a lodging, as well as the interesting point you made with Holiday Inns. People are staying in, they're saving money. You're not spending as much money going out to eat, buy other types of goods, and it's not necessarily like a price issue that's the problem. It's more about the type of what you can offer as a company to adapt. And it's a good time if you are considered like a business that people would still be willing to travel to, whether it's a hotel. It might be interesting to raise prices at this point, because people do have that extra reserve of money that they're holding on to. Irina, I'd like to go to you and talk a little bit more about any other interesting niche pivots or new business models that you have seen recently.
Yes, new business models. Great question. I think we're just basically surrounded by new business models. Our old business models just don't seem to work at all, and we all have to adapt. And that includes also kind of the investors as well, right? Because our old business models and the way we are doing business and how we evaluate things doesn't work anymore. I see that just on the side, those that are more generalists are doing so much better, because if you have very narrow pieces, you are kind of screwed, right? Because there's so many, there's not enough field for you to be able to play to do. So the diversity is really good. I think that one of the bigger opportunities we're seeing is exactly in what you guys were saying, is that adapting into providing more catered services. So we went to a ranch. I'll give you an example. So we went to a ranch, and it's in the heart of Texas, basically in the middle of nowhere. And they do not have nice hotels. They have like the regular hotels, the chain hotels. And so we stayed at two. because we didn't want to camp and whatever. And at both of them, they removed the breakfast out. So there's no breakfast, there's nothing. So they basically scaffolded their surfaces to almost nothing, right? So when you're checking in, there's not a person, there's like, there's now less assistance to them. And to Julio's point, I think the opportunities come in adopting business models. So saying, okay, how we can actually provide an experience to where, where people would go into and be happy to have stayed there because maybe breakfast is offered, right? And maybe it needs to be packaged in a different way, but just a completely done, go and grab your thing just doesn't work. And obviously, kind of a COVID or health protocols, I see huge opportunities right now and moving into the future, because I think for now we live in a new reality where people are not going to be okay with you having a cold or regular seasonal virus or whatever the hell somebody might have. Pop some Tylenol and come to work, because that was our reality before. Like if you're sick, you're expected to show up to work. And even if you're told not to, a lot of people felt like they had to. You couldn't really take like 5 days to recover. One day if you're dying, you come in. And so I think that our future reality is not going to be that way. And the kind of a health screening protocols and best practices will be the reality of the future, regardless of this virus, and to make sure that we are kind of living in a healthier way. And so big opportunities that apply to all three, to travel, transportation, and hospitality, is actually that niche innovation that allows you to do health protocols, screening, and then application of those practices as well, right? Or maybe it's some kind of service. In Texas, we're seeing that a lot, that services are popping up, and basically that's what they do. They take the responsibility to make sure that it's a great process, and they do whole integration into it. And so, and that includes maybe redesign of the whole layout of how the area in a hospitality is set up in order to make sure that those 6 feet are there, because 6 feet is going to stay longer and longer and longer, right? So it's just trying to become a standard, I think, for quite a bit, until eventually we'll just go back to, to tiny. So that's where I see big opportunities right now, and a big need, right? Because as soon as we establish these protocols, as soon as we all feel comfortable to where, okay, I can be facilitated to my comfort zone, right? Because we have this radiant of people, how they feel about what needs to be done, right? And nobody knows what those best practices are. The reason I know about that is because we've been very, very careful making sure that we apply best practices for the ARA gathering, the one that we are hosting. And that's why we actually doing it outdoors, because we believe that that's kind of, for now, it's the best way to make sure that everybody has enough space but still connects and has ability to have the natural buffer of the nature, right? Because the air conditioning is the biggest problem that people are concerned about. So we see a lot of gatherings happening in outdoors, and a lot of like kind of outdoors, very sparse, with a more comfortable seating and privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially, when people are like traveling, and when you go to a hotel, as you said, you expect, for breakfast or something of like an amenity that you're very much used to, but, in today's world, it's not going to be there. So it kind of cuts into that experience. And hotels need to travel that like fine line between, the safety aspect of what you have to do for COVID versus, offering amenities and perks that people are very much the reason why they go visit hotels. But I think you hit a very important point that I hope like our viewers are paying attention to, was that, the services that you can offer to, provide, best practice for, COVID safety, or even for like a hotel on how to adapt, screening guests or provide guest amenities, is a huge opportunity right now, as these like businesses are, even to Julio's point with a Holiday Inn, they're looking to how to adapt. How do I, continue my business while making the best practice changes for the safety of my patrons. And if you had a company that can come in and our entire job is to make sure you follow the best practices so that people trust you as a brand again. That's a huge in demand right now for hotels, airliners, small business, anyone. It's much like, when digital transformation came around, people were looking for those experts in Zoom calls. For both of us, for the blockchain industry, when it first came around, people were looking for those experts for token economics and etc. Not everyone wants to become an expert in everything, but they'll greatly look for an expert to come in to provide that brand and trust for their patrons. So great points there. I love them. So to kind of move forward a little bit more in the conversation, let's go talk a little bit about work from home. Work from home has drastically changed a lot of the space overall, especially in the travel and hospitality. No more business, hotels, people aren't traveling through mass transportation anymore. Commuting is almost non-existent for a large part of at least the United States. Is there any other, effects that you've seen that from work from home that changed, the travel and hospitality industry? To you, Irina.
Oh, yes. Yes, actually, it's interesting, work from home, and what we're learning from it, what we're seeing a lot is actually kind of a private gathering of the companies. So we see a lot of companies going into retreats, but not in the retreats as they used to, as a way to reward everybody and bring families and maybe have activities and a team bonding, but really a work retreat where they would, let's say, rent a big Airbnb. So really good. All the luxury right now is doing pretty well, right? Especially when comparing to others, right? Obviously, maybe not better than ever, but some are doing better than ever. And so basically what we're seeing is that companies are now feeling comfortable as people are coming out and saying, okay, well, we do want to be able to be and are comfortable to be in our bubble, which is the social cycle that they define. And companies are moving forward, and fall is all over the place. You see people kind of going for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and doing a deep dive, in-person deep dive for teams to be able to work together. So to me, what that indicates is that we really have a need to be able to work together in person. We need to be able to have that communication, because there's still a lag, even in this Zoom, to where we can see body language, where we can see or hear voices and all that. There's something about being able to participate in person. And so for the offices, I think that we're going to get to a point to where people are going to go back to offices. They need it. There's a lot of articles that are written about, we're learning a lot. It's not as awesome as we thought. It is also great, right? Because we are seeing that people can be effective at home, and that that we just need to make sure that we regulate it. And so I'm seeing that offices are now saying, okay, how do we regroup these experiences again to facilitate to bubbles, right? So it's not a co-working place to where everyone is just in a small, and I'm talking about for startups, right? Because the bigger offices can redo their own remodeling, and that's happening to make sure that your sub teams are kind of have their own bubbles. Everything is about bubbles right now, not bubble growing to pop, but bubble like a safety and security bubble. And so a lot of companies now going through internal kind of a testing and send surveys out to their employees saying, what would you be comfortable? How would you like to participate? What can we do for you? And there's a lot of engineering that's happening on the back end for bigger companies. And then the smaller companies are looking at how do we combine? Because there is a huge benefit for startups not to have to travel. Huge benefits. They spend too much money on hotels and meetings and dinners and trying to impress with their offices. It's just too much spending. I'm totally happy with the startups being remote with with the regularity of showing that there is a team working environment where, you know, it's maybe before the product launches or at the times when they need it. That's a true lean, and I like lean startups that, you know, they do better. And so that's what I'm seeing.
I think it's it's work from home. You know, as you said, we've seen people are still productive. You know, it's not an issue of productivity, but you know, there is that little bit of magic and serendipity that comes from being in the office together with your coworkers. And you know, at least for Silicon Valley, that's where the magic happens. That's where you get those great ideas because you have this chance, you know, run into with a coworker, you know, down the hall. But you know, Julio, you're based in New York. A lot of public transportation there that you know power the commute from you know home to work. Any major changes that you've seen, or you know, has work from home like really been adapted to the you know New York metropolitan city?
I think working from home is a reality, and most companies that we know have adapted to that situation, which is kind of sad because when you visit Midtown Manhattan these days, it's really it's almost abandoned. Um, you know, gone are the days of heavy travel in Midtown Manhattan. There really are literally almost no people walking the streets of Midtown Manhattan, and it's eerie. It's almost like you think it was a Sunday every day. That's you know that's the type of business activity you get, the level of a Sunday, but without the tourists who would on a Sunday, you know, provide the alternative, you know, energy for the area. Um, but pretty much every bank, every law firm that we deal with, every you know large type of a company is working from home. Yes, occasionally maybe because they still have an office, um, perhaps because the landlords are giving them a break. Um, every now and then they show up at the office, but by and large, everyone's working from home. Um, and you know, this virus will have changed the business world because people have realized that many of their expenses that Irina discussed really aren't necessary. Um, you know, who needs an office in the most expensive building in the middle of Midtown Manhattan anymore? You really don't, and you certainly don't need 5 floors. You might need you know a few offices if you really want, but no need for everybody to have an office there, and no need for people to have to gather. I think people enjoy not having the commute, and frankly, I enjoy not paying as much in dry cleaning. Um, Look, this is a nice polo shirt. This is not a suit and a tie, and you know, a white shirt that has to be laundered every day at high cost, right? Um, but you know, I'm not really saying New York was hard hit, and New York is going to take a while to recover. And when it recovers, it's not going to be the same, but we'll figure something out, right? Now, some initiatives, I'm sorry to report, haven't worked out. The idea of giving hotels the business of housing homeless people, that seems to have backfired. uh, that you know, look, hotels were closed. They figured they could collect a little bit of money from the city from the homeless. That's you know, so there are alternative strategies that you can use to figure out new ways to deal with a pandemic and pivot. And there are strategies that don't work. And I think that one didn't work, and people are stepping back. Anyway, you know, the situation is what it is. I think that we're looking at opportunities in things like telemedicine. We're looking at opportunities in things, you know, like uh, you know, artificial intelligence. You know, working on the user to provide a more tailored experience as opposed to the, you know, look, how much money did Disney spend with Mulan? How much money did the people with the new James Bond film spend? I'm close to a particular producer in the Heights. You know, he's rather famous. He spent a lot of money putting together the movie version of the musical in the Heights. I'm talking about Lin Manuel Miranda and you know, of Hamilton fame. He did release Hamilton on Disney Plus, and that for a while looked really good for Disney Plus, but Disney Plus has not been able to come up with another event. The Mulan thing, they're charging so much money for it. The point is that, you know, the one big movie catering to everybody, movie theaters are closing left and right. Just today, there were some headlines about movie theaters shutting down. They say temporarily, but we'll see. We'll see what that means. So again, I mean, in this industry, it's tough. People need to survive. People need to save money, and people need to maybe come up with interesting new things. That there is still money for from venture capital, and investors will back interesting opportunities. And so, to anyone listening who has a startup idea, if it's a good idea, this is not a crisis that affected the venture capital industry. It didn't even affect the financial services as much. So all that money that was there to be invested in March is still there. And in fact, there's probably even more of a need to invest it now, maybe even before the end of the year. So keep putting together those business plans. Keep thinking about the types of ideas that you think could work in the new world. And this is probably the time to approach some VC capital. It's much easier now because people are working from home to actually get a call return, to get a meeting, because it takes now no time to set up for a meeting. If you can just get 30 minutes from a VC fund, you know, you'll probably get it sooner than if you had to travel to your area of the world, Kent, and you know, try and get a face-to-face meeting with a VC. I mean, that was getting really difficult, and it's become easier to some extent. We'll certainly have time for anybody with a new idea, and if we can't help, we may know people who can. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of the fact that people don't need to wear suits anymore, and you know, look your best on the camera, and you know, hope for the best.
I agree. Not everyone needs to travel to San Francisco anymore to, you know, go pitch, you know, VCs and go make the, you know, the infamous trek down Sand Hill. You know, VC industry, interestingly, you know, it's never been more. It seems like it's never been more active. It seems like someone's rolling out a new fund, like pun intended, rolling funds as well. But you know, every day someone's like, you know, raise X amount of money. I have to deploy it to make my LPs happy by the end of the year, pandemic or not. So a lot of investments to be made. But you know, to follow up on that, you know, Julio, is there any interesting, you know, opportunities or niches that you're looking to invest right now? What kind of ideas pique your interest?
Well, you know, experiences from home pique our interest. Anyone making content, you know, even from before, you know how there's the saying cash is king in finance. Well, I think content is king in entertainment and leisure. If you define content as what's being offered, you know, to consume, content is a good hospital, a good hotel stay. You know, content is the Galapagos Island. You know, and content is also film, and you know, but so make content. I think content is the most difficult thing to achieve. You know, it takes a lot of talent and a lot of good ideas to make good content. But I think if you have content, you have something to show. Society now is very much about, you know, show me. Even before that meeting that you can get with a VC fund, you're going to need to have a good presentation, namely content. You may have to prepare videos. You may have to have you know, online presence. All that is content. Just focus on content. You know, I believe there's plenty of demand for good content. Just not the generic content that you can get, or the extremely expensive content that, you know, Disney tried to make with Mulan, right? It seemed like a risk to spend, you know, $300 million on a movie. It seemed like a risk, but it was in fact a very conservative thing to do for Disney. You're giving people a story they know. You're giving people, you know, familiar characters. You're giving them more of the same, and just very expensive. You know, it's not risky. It's not interesting. It's just more of the same, right? Think about what you can do that is not more of the same, and see if you can convey it in any kind of graphical, content heavy way. I guarantee you're going to have success. um, you know just make sure you get the opinions of some of the people who know what's going on in the world, because sometimes what you think is original is no longer original. There's always competition for what you think you just came up with. If you really do your research, you might find another 5 companies already doing the same thing, right? Check on the originality. But if you're pretty sure that you have something original, then by all means pursue it.
I think you made a very good point about just the idea of content. A lot of people associate content with just, media, marketing materials, etc. But, you said, the Galapagos Islands is content. It's anything that drives attraction to, your business or your destination, etc. That is all content. And I think people forget, they love to say like content is king, and it is king, originally from the quote from Bill Gates about the internet, but more so now about, the media realms, whether movies or, any specific unique parts of your business that keeps driving people back to it. It's all content. And
Absolutely. And let me interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
oh yeah, no worries.
A way of, sports is obviously leisure or entertainment. I mean, sports kind of falls into that. And I know there's other panels that talk about sports and gaming. There's a lot of really interesting content being created in gaming, and there's a lot of old content that can be given a new life by thinking about the audience in a more all-inclusive way. Meaning, if you're going to watch a football game, right, you may not just want to have to project the football team or the football game and have the audience be passive. You need to think about the entertainment now as an interactive, active user type of engagement. If someone's watching, if you think someone's just going to be watching TV, that's just no longer going to work, because they're on their phone at the same time as they're watching the TV, and they want to have connections and they want to know what's going on. There are really interesting companies that are working on sports betting, for example. And I don't mean to, tell people to go gamble, but betting gives a whole new meaning to watching a game if the betting becomes interactive and you're being fed back information about how odds are changing for anything that's going on. And we're heading to a world where, as you're watching, you're going to be able to actively interact with what you're watching, even change it, in some ways. Think about that. Think about the person absorbing the content and how that person needs to be try and get a bigger share of mind as the content is being displayed. Just like you talk about a share of wallet in many products, you need to talk about the share of attention. Get people really, really engaged in whatever they were doing. Think about other ways that you can supplement that experience. Virtual reality, all of that falls in. That's a very exciting thing to do, and that's probably the future of leisure. Maybe it's not as much the travel, but it's at least the travel within your own head.
Yeah, I think it's the experience is very much important. People can't go to sports games anymore, so they watch like the NBA finals on TV now, but you're on your phone. It's no different. It's very much different than being in an arena where you have all these sights and sounds that affect the experience, the etc. Your peripherals. But now you have to kind of change and adapt to what's your user doing now. They're probably scrolling on their phone. Is it about sports betting? Is it about reading the news and the games going on in the background? Very different way to look at it. Before we jump into our lightning round, I'd like to go back to you, Irina. What interesting things, or what piques your interest now about investments, or what are you looking to invest in?
Right. So what's piquing my interest is innovations. So all innovations, integration of innovations is something that I've been passionate about. I believe that we must unite our verticals because I think that's where big opportunities are. Companies that the kind of older stage companies, later stage companies. And right now I'm trying to separate my language from traditional VC. So C, D, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and father. Anyhow, so, and the reason I'm doing that is because in different industries, these things mean different they're just completely different. So in a space industry, for example, your seed round would be a company that has a team, revenue, product, and they're raising $5 million, and so and they often will say like, we're seed, pre-seed, but we want to be, so which in traditional tech world, it's just a bananas. I don't even know how to say it in other words. And actually that is present, that this connection and the language present throughout many different verticals and the different industries. And so I'm looking at uniting kind of innovations and making sure that we create truly global capital markets and really provide opportunities to invest and opportunities to get liquidity to investors as well, because it's kind of a both ways. So companies that are going through a growth stage and are the companies that I'm looking for, and it's on many different verticals. On personal level, right now, I am not investing in anything as far as deploying funding. We're spending our time on building the company and doing the things. But for my platform too, I do look though for startups as up and coming, because those that are just a seed or a round in usual stage are going to be up and coming stars. And one of the things that I keep my eye on is looking at those companies that have the potential to have a big leap, right? So how I want companies to basically stop thinking in, I need to raise enough for 6 months, well, for 18 months, I need to show bootstrap or whatever, minimum runway, 18 months, but really, I need to show that I'm doing it, I'm raising enough funds for a year, and, I will go back raising again in 6 months if we deploy well. So, the traditional template, because there are companies that are at the point to where they need to start scaling and they can benefit from bigger funding that would not allow them to participate in a traditional VC. So those are the companies that I really keep my eye open on. And even if they're earlier stage, there are the companies that I kind of file into up and coming, and we will be featuring up and coming. There's no reason why we going public right now is the way it is. And it's changing very fast. And we are living in a very fast adapting world where traditional venture capitalism systems are changing. VCs need to adapt, and I'm here basically making sure that we work with VCs and we work with companies, connecting them and allowing them for this transformation. This is a fast transformation, right? You said it right. We only have about 6 weeks before we need to deploy, right? Because let's face it, in reality of VC, Wednesday before Thanksgiving is when all deals have to begin. Like, not gonna look, and COVID or not COVID, nobody is going to be spending their winter holidays on, looking and evaluating new deals. You gotta close. This is the cutoff. You're not in. And I think that it puts a lot of pressure on VCs. As I mentioned, those that have very narrow verticals are not able to deploy because there's simply just not enough companies that are doing well in one little vertical. There's a lot of innovation happening, but how do you actually go and get to them? Now, the way I think we do it is we actually participate on VCTV because we get to learn about each other's portfolio companies. Julio, today, seeing you share your diversified portfolio, knowing that you also have seen your earlier stage companies, I think this is important because for VCs, this is how we get to know what is that you're investing in? What is that I am not seeing that you have, and the same vice versa. And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate being here and participating in what you're doing. And so, long answer to a short question, and I'll give you a short answer, is scaling companies, but also definitely keeping an eye on younger stage companies in all verticals. I don't care what you are. If you're an awesome entrepreneur, I want to talk to you. If you are a venture capitalist or family office or private equity and you have portfolio companies, I need to talk to you.
I can't agree anymore with your sentiment. I feel like we do pigeonhole things too much into industries, fund like sizes, etc. And like one of my biggest pet peeves working in VC for a while is the nomenclature. Like this is seed, this is pre-seed, this is Series B. And honestly, it changes by industry. I just go, what's your round size? You're trying to raise this amount of money? Because that could be seed in one VC's book, but that can be, a Series A in another. That's, as you said, the environment's changing so much now. We don't really know what is what. But, if you're innovating, go talk, go meet VCs, grow. And, on that note, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Google me. Googling works great. You'll see whatever way fits you. LinkedIn message. I respond to LinkedIn messages all the time. Just make a reference what it is for. If you're a company, tell me, what stage of the company you are, at least in some ways. And if you're VC, let me know that what is that you want from me? How can I assist in that? That's the best way. And also Twitter. I'm doing Twitter too. I haven't been really Twittering, but I'm doing Twitter. I think it's a great way. It's a great voice. People say about filtering, but everything is filtering. At least it's kind of a great way for us to. I like to go and see what people say on Twitter nowadays too. Just to kind of see what is that your voice, your tone of voice, your mental positioning in the world, because LinkedIn is a little bit more professional network. So people filter themselves more on LinkedIn than they filter themselves on Twitter. So I like to look at the LinkedIn, and then I like to glance at the Twitter to kind of see the feel of the personality.
Perfect. Thank you. And then make sure to reach out to Irina for anything if you're a VC or a startup. Thank you for your time today and joining. Julio, seems like best way to reach you is always your email and Instagram, but love for you just to say that yourself.
Email is, our website is nybaycapital.com. Although if you type it all out, New York Bay Capital, you'll also get there. And my email there is julio@nybaycapital.com. There are several of us who are partners, but that's the way to reach me. And always feel free to reach out, especially if you need funding with a good idea.
Perfect. Thank you, Julio. Thank you for your time today. If you ever have to reach out to me, most active on Twitter, LinkedIn works as well. But, if you like today's episode, make sure to drop a like, definitely subscribe below. And thank you all for tuning in for this episode of VCTV. Thank you, and thank you to our panelists.